The archaeologist here has missed something totally, completely out of it under the Act. So what they've done is they've gone and done their cultural heritage management plan. Evidently, during this plan, I was the one that contacted AAV and asked them to come and see you guys. So during that time, AAV came and registered your collection because I knew you had it.
They did.
And I knew that these guys hadn't spoken to you. So as a local in the background, didn't want to cause too much trouble, said to AAV, these archaeologists aren't picking up the whole story, they've missed a heap. So I asked them to come and talk to you guys, and that's how AAV are aware of that.
Yes.
There's further information in this report. Have you got the whole report?
No,
I've got the whole report,
I do
and
not
it's
have the whole
smoke and
report.
mirrors.
Yeah.
And that's
it
where...
really is a lot of wasted paper.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen
In
the
here
whole.
somewhere, I'm sure. If not, I'll have a copy of the collection at AAV. So AAV have written a report on this. It's only a short one by Joe Bell, but they went and spoke to a few locals and got some stories. What this is missing, this whole report, is under the Act. We can also talk to them about not just the physical stuff, but we can talk about your spiritual connection, and that's what they've missed. They've said no physical stuff, and unfortunately Yorta Yorta haven't come across with the other side of it. So we do have an opportunity here to have a look at it, talk to Andrew from AAV and build up a case around the connection to country here that they haven't picked up on. So what we're looking at before, we can say, all right, this stuff comes from this area.
Exactly.
This comes from Sketeton Hill. We know we were here. This is what these people were doing. This is some information we can gather from all this. This is what we know, what locals have told us, so we'll need to really have a look at some of the diaries and stuff. I think we could build a really good case.
Yeah. That's another axe blank. This one's an axe, stone axe.
It's been used and nicked and broken. And
Yeah. See, they didn't put an handle on it. They could have been using it as a small hand axe or things like that. You could see the way it was held, and it fits in, well, as an Aboriginal, a small hand, and it fits in your hand pretty good. They could have been wanting to make a handle for it later on, but it was ground down. It had a lot of use because, as you can see, it splintered off the edge there.
you can see the shine on the edge. From the
Yeah,
That is shown.
very much so.
Beautiful.
Yeah, what's this? Does that?
Oh,
There.
oh, look at that!
Yes.
And you look at, see
I've never
those
seen
things?
that
Oh,
one.
my
That's
goodness.
two pieces to me,
Yeah.
but they're not.
No,
No, it's just one piece.
I've never seen a double-edged one like that before.
Magnificent, isn't it?
That's
When you look at,
stunning.
and you can look at artefacts, look at the things, pick them up, and
Go
automatically,
back together.
my goodness, you know, you see. So now you know that is one
Check that out,
piece.
Kim.
That's
Yes.
not two pieces.
Yeah, yes.
If it's,
That's brilliant.
Unbelievable, isn't
This
it's
one.
like you went to have a go to make this side.
Exactly, yeah.
And went, nah, bugger that.
No,
and
I'll try the
down
other
this
edge.
edge.
Yeah.
And it's got a nice edge on it.
My
What
word.
on earth is he using it for? Like, that's it.
Well, it could have been the same way again, you know, either in the
A lot
hand
of
or
bashing.
even, yeah.
Actually, they've been bashing it on,
Yeah.
bashing it on that edge
On
too.
the edge.
Using it to do something. Maybe it was deliberately broken so they could use it as a wedge.
Could
Maybe.
be too.
And with Sketeton Hill in particular, with these things coming from that area, these things over here coming from that particular area, is there's a lot of story about, from the community side of things, that there were burials. I've been told that there are connections of Tommy McRae to Sketeton Hill, and the tree burial stuff up there. And now the tree burial is a traditional type of burial we did in this type of country. So if you went down on the river and weren't in those sand dunes, you were burying people in trees. In the early days when Europeans first got here, they were walking through these hills. This comes from some families around here, and they believed it was the spookiest place on earth. They were scared to death
That's documented.
of walking through there.
That's
And
documented.
the reason why they were scared to death of walking through there is there were people buried in the trees all around them.
Alan French is one.
Yeah. And people will still tell you that today. You can talk to just, many families that have been here for generation after generation will tell you the fear they had of walking through that bush. It wasn't just because the Aboriginal people were still there, because in a lot of cases they weren't. The spirit of those people was still in those trees. If you walk up there today, you can feel them. You know the ancestors are still present in that country. We feel safe. We feel like we can walk through there. But when I talk to other people, they say they are really, really scared or frightened or don't even like to walk past that area. And that is because our ancestors are still there protecting that country today. That's their burial ground. And when we talk to people who went through Lake Mudamere Reserve over here, they talk about Sketeton Hill as being the traditional burial grounds. They talk about that's where Tommy McRae's personal belongings were buried in a tree, because traditionally he was buried down there in Mudamere at the reserve, but that's not what he wanted. Apparently he wanted to be buried in a tree on Sketeton Hill. These stories are documented in Aboriginal communities. We know that that area had special significance for our old guys around here. Unfortunately, there's just not enough people still living here today to be able to
speak out on behalf of
and be able to educate people on that connection to these places and what they really mean to us as people.
But see, we still have that connection of people speaking out, because we've got this community that is still here, and we've still got the elders within the community that have been given artefacts, and this is the proof of how all these things come together. And as you just said, of Tommy McRae, one of the most noted artists around the place, as a connection to this type of these artefacts. That the artefacts come together with the people.
Sandy, can you just explain to us and summarise for us how you feel about the importance of the hill that we've been talking about?
Well, after chatting with Graham and the other local people here today, I am now of the opinion that there's a very important part of this, and that's what's sitting on this table here today. You know, whether there's skeletons still up on that hill or not, we know they were there because these people actually found them when they came here and established this town. But the point of it is, every bit significant of this whole thing is these artefacts that here, they were used by these people. And I'm so excited that, you know, we still have this evidence today, and there's no doubt. And that these people here who came and established this town way back in the early time still have that same respect for what's out there on that hill, and I'm so excited about that. From an Indigenous person's point of view, I think that that's a wonderful thing, because here we are, there's two groups of people that have that same respect and you know, and recognise the significance of these artefacts, that this is a very historical place and should be treated as so.
Yes, this morning we're talking to Mrs. Eunice Di Piazza. Eunice is a long-term resident of Chiltern and has fond memories of the area. We're standing in front of St Mary's Catholic Church here, looking across the town at Sketeton Hill in the background. Now Eunice has some interesting things to tell us. Eunice, could you please tell us your memories of Sketeton Hill, say starting off as a child?
Well, actually my memories, they start off as soon as I, was aware of the things around me. The hill overlooked the house where I was actually born. And, the Sketeton Hill came to be a very favourite spot of ours. And growing up as a child, many a picnic I had up there with my brothers. They would take their ferrets along and, catch a few rabbits. And, the skeleton, it just became like an old friend to us. Look, I must say, I'd be really very sad to see anything happen up there. I really would. And it's not only for me, but I think for the visitors to the town and most of the townspeople themselves, to lose the Sketeton Hill, it would really be like losing part of Chiltern, because as you're coming in the Rutherglen Road to Chiltern, you're coming up the highway, you look at the Sketeton Hill and you think, gosh, I'm nearly home. There's the old skeleton.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the Sketeton Hill, it really is a vital part of our landscape. I know there have been artists who come here and, you know, they paint the town and with the Sketeton Hill in the background. And it would be such a shame for everyone to see it no longer our lovely old Sketeton Hill.
We're talking to Mr. Rex Fuge, a long-time resident of Chiltern, and we're standing here at the Rutherglen entrance to the town. Rex, we'd be very grateful if you could summarise your memories and thoughts and feelings about Sketeton Hill, which is in the background.
Yes, well, we're standing here right, we're looking across the Sketeton Hill where Major Mitchell came through in 1837, and of course also by 1870s my grandfather John Godfrey Horne was born right on the edge of Sketeton Hill, and that's where he lived for many years. So I have always known about Sketeton Hill, but also it is the hill that dominates Chiltern. Chiltern is in a small ravine, and we have hills right around us, and Sketeton Hill is part of that hillside, and it just fits on to the end of the Chiltern Hills, what we're named after.
And what would it mean to you and the town if that hill were removed?
It would be a great scar on the landscape. We would be able to see it from every entrance, like here on the Rutherglen Road. You can certainly see it at Cornish Town and Christmas Town as well, but you can also see it on both sides of the freeway as well.
Yes, it's interesting. Behind you we can see Mount Pilot, we can see the National Park, both of which are sacred, if you like, and yet the bit in the middle, Sketeton Hill, apparently is expendable.
I just think the Aboriginal history is very interesting, what happened at Sketeton Hill, but also happened right around. There's certainly scar trees around us, and on the Rutherglen Road further out, and at the museum we have a large collection of Aboriginal artefacts, as well as artefacts from the Chiltern area, from every area of the Chiltern.
This would seem to prove the Aboriginality of the area, as you say, because Mount Pilot, Mount Kookaburra, and Lady Franklin, they've all been part of this range and part of the Aboriginality of the area.
Yes, that's all very true. We certainly have all those explorers that came right through this area, and it's been very much a part of Chiltern history for all those years from 1836 on.
We're standing here at the Beechworth entrance to Chiltern, with Sketeton Hill, of course, in the background, together with a homestead, and we're talking to Pat Murdoch, a long-time resident of Chiltern. And Pat, could I ask you for your thoughts and feelings about Sketeton Hill?
Yes, you could, Graham. Now, I'm not a long-term resident. I've only been here about 40 years, you understand. But before that, I lived in the UK, in England, Scotland, London, a short time in Greece, Melbourne. And when I saw Chiltern, I thought, that's it. That's my town. Because what a privilege it is to live in a small town surrounded completely by forest and hills. It's absolutely beautiful. That's why I loved it to start with, and that's why I love it now. In fact, it reminds me of that beautiful Welsh poem by Dylan Thomas, Under Milkwood, about the dear little Welsh village. And if Sketeton Hill were to be damaged in any way, it would be like damaging a member of the family. We just love it so much. It's always there. It's our signal that we're home. Whenever we go overseas to travel, we come back and think, all roads lead to Sketeton Hill. Lovely. Don't damage it.
It's important to black culture. It's also important to white culture. So, you know, what does skeleton mean to you?
Well, I was born here in Chiltern, as my father was and my grandfather. We came here in 1848, actually. And I can see it from my bedroom window every morning. It's such an integral part of Chiltern, you know, it's absolutely iconic. And I always remember my Uncle Clyde, who was born in 1891, and he left Australia in the early 20s and didn't come back till sometime in the 50s. And when he was interviewed by one of the newspapers, they said, "What's the biggest change that you've seen in Chiltern?" He said, "What have they done to the skeleton?" The interviewer said, "What do you mean, what have they done to the skeleton?" He said, "When I went away, it was clothed in forest." And he said, "Now it's half naked." He said, "Whoever let them do that?" And these words keep coming back to me when I think of what's proposed to do to it now, which of course is going to be forever. I mean, it's not like chopping down a tree, or if you've got an inappropriate house, you know, in a picturesque situation, you can get rid of it in the future. But when you pull down a hill, I mean, this is for eternity, isn't it? It's not just for our generation, it's for the generations to come, and surely shows a contempt for the integrity of the landscape. You know, this is the way it's always been, and you would like to think that our children and the Aboriginals' successors would enjoy it in just the same way that we have.
Yes, and it's, as you said before, it's such an iconic thing. It's something that you can see from all angles and approaches. I think you mentioned it gives you a feeling of being home.
Oh, look, I travel quite a lot. And coming back from the north or coming up from the south, as you approach Chiltern, it's the first thing that you see that says Chiltern. And once I see the skeleton, I know I'm home. Just the same as once I come through the gap at Glenrowan. For me, that's the northeast. Yes. Everything I can see from the top of the Glenrowan Gap with its hideous quarry there. Yes. If anyone wants to see the destruction that can be wreaked by a quarry, you've only got to go to Glenrowan.
Yes.
So yes, it's so close to the town. I mean, you can see it from almost every part of the town. And surely the quarry that's already there, that these people have been operating, I can never understand why I mean, I know they've kicked it out now, but there was an invisible quarry in the forest. If you asked 99 out of 100 of Chiltern people where the quarry was, they wouldn't be able to tell you. They'd just be able to say up there in the forest somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not okay to have an invisible quarry in the forest, but the suggestion is that it's okay to have it in the most visible situation in the whole town. Yes. I can see no common sense in that at all.
No, indeed. And what do you think future generations will think of us if we allow that hill to be removed?
People will say it's like wars and things. How could you have done that? Where were the voices who spoke up and said you can't do that?
Yes.
You know, this is something you can't do. And with the heritage people, and rightly so, they dictate within the heritage area what colour you can paint your roof, what kind of pickets you can have in the fence in front of your house. And yet here it's proposed to remove an entire huge piece of scenery, and that's okay. Whereas you can't have that particular sort of pickets. I mean, where is the common sense in that?
Indeed.
It's just completely illogical. Yeah. And as for the argument that it provides such a lot of employment, yeah. I mean, we're told by our masters in Canberra that we have 100% employment here in Australia. So any of the six people, only two of whom I understand are locals, any yes. of those who lose their job will have no trouble in replacing it. As I'm sure anyone in Chiltern who'll tell you, who've tried to have someone to cut their lawns, yes. will tell you there are job openings yes, all yes. over the place.
I believe since the quarry, the old quarry, started, or finished I should say, that those people are gone anyway. So there would be the 6 or 8 jobs that are contemplated will probably be new people anyway.
And there, of course, too, with the old quarry, I understand that their obligation when it was first mooted was that it be made good.
Yes.
Well, I mean, how? And that was a hole in the ground. Well, you've only got to go out there and see what an enormous hole in the ground it is.
Yes.
And has it been made good? Not on your life.
No.
So how can you make good a whole landscape, which is what this entails,
yes.
and where are you going to get the material to do it with anyhow?
Yes.
And of course, like so many of these companies, they have their wicked way, mining companies and so forth,
Yes.
and when it's no longer of any use to them, they fold their wings
Yes,
and disappear.
Yes, yes.
And nobody then is responsible.
Yes.
So where is the screw to turn?
Yes, exactly. Andrew Gilmore, thank you very much for giving us your thoughts today.
My pleasure. Like so many people who live in this beautiful part of the world, we love it and we want it to stay as beautiful as it can be for the generations to come.
Thank you, Andrew.